I'm 78 years old, and there's a conversation I replay in my head almost every single day. For 43 years now. 43 years. That's longer than many of you have been alive, and I still go back to that evening, to those words, to the way the door closed. And I still cannot forgive myself. I'm not telling you this so you'll feel sorry for me. At my age, pity is a strange thing. It doesn't change anything anymore. I'm telling you this because maybe someone watching is standing where I stood back then, and you still have time to do it differently. My father was a simple man. He worked at a factory his whole life, started when he was 16, retired when he was 62. 46 years of the same commute, the same lunch pail, the same worn hands coming home every evening. He never complained, not once that I can remember. He wasn't the kind of father who said, "I love you." That wasn't how men of his generation spoke, but he showed it in other ways. He showed it by working double shifts so I could go to university. He showed it by sitting quietly in the audience at my graduation, wearing a suit I later learned he'd borrowed from a neighbor because he didn't own one nice enough. He showed it by never asking for anything in return, and I took all of it for granted. When I was 35, I was building what I thought was an important life. I had a position at an engineering firm, I was married, had 2 young children, had just bought a house in a neighborhood I thought proved I'd made something of myself. I was busy. God, I was so busy. I remember feeling like there weren't enough hours in the day, like I was always running behind, always catching up to something that kept moving further away. My father had retired by then. My mother had passed 2 years earlier. Her heart, they said, though I think she was just tired. After she died, my father became quieter. He'd call me on Sunday evenings and we'd talk for maybe 10 minutes. I'd tell him about work. He'd tell me the weather. Sometimes there were long silences and I'd look at the clock, thinking about everything I needed to do. One Sunday, he called and asked if I could come visit. Just for a day, he said. He wanted to show me something in the garage. Some old photographs he'd found, some things from when I was a boy. I said I couldn't. I had a project deadline. The kids had activities, maybe next month. He said, "Okay." He always said okay. 3 weeks later, he called again. Same request. This time his voice sounded different. Slower, maybe, or softer. I didn't pay attention to it then. I was distracted. I was always distracted. I told him I'd try to come the following weekend. I didn't promise. I never promised. Promising would have meant I had to follow through, and I wasn't sure I could. That following weekend, I didn't go. Something came up at work. It always did. A month passed, then 2. We kept having our Sunday calls, but I noticed he talked less, asked fewer questions. I told myself he was just getting older. I told myself I'd visit soon when things calmed down. Things never calm down when you're 35 and chasing something you can't name. Then came the call on a Tuesday afternoon. My aunt. She said my father had been to the doctor. There was something wrong, something serious. She didn't have all the details, but I needed to come home. I drove 4 hours that night. When I walked into his house, it smelled the same as it always had, coffee and something faintly metallic, like the factory had never quite left his clothes. He was sitting in his chair by the window, thinner than I remembered, and he smiled when he saw me. We talked that evening, mostly small things. The house needed a new roof. The neighbor's dog had gotten loose again. He asked about the children, and I showed him photographs. He held them close to his face because his eyes weren't what they used to be. At some point, I asked him what the doctor had said. He waved his hand like he was brushing away a fly. "It's nothing," he said. "They worry too much." But I saw the papers on the kitchen counter. I saw the name of an oncologist. I saw a brochure about treatment options. and I understood that it was not nothing. I stayed for 3 days. We didn't talk about the diagnosis. Not really. He didn't want to, and I didn't push. I think I was afraid. Afraid of what he might say, afraid of what I might have to feel. On the last evening, we sat on his porch as the sun went down. It was September, and the air had that particular coolness that tells you summer is ending. He was quiet for a long time, and then he said something I'll never forget. He said, "I've been thinking about your mother a lot lately." I nodded. I didn't know what to say. He said, "I should have danced with her more. She used to ask me to dance in the kitchen, and I always said I was too tired. I wasn't too tired, I was just, I don't know, embarrassed maybe. Thought it was silly." He looked at his hands. She stopped asking after a while. We sat there in the silence. I should have said something. I should have told him that I understood, that I was doing the same thing with my own wife, my own children. I should have told him that I was sorry I hadn't visited more, that I was sorry I'd missed so many Sunday dinners, that I was sorry I'd treated his phone calls like interruptions instead of gifts. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I said I had to get back. The project, the kids, the life I thought was so important. He nodded. He said he understood. And then he said something, very quietly, almost like he was talking to himself. He said, "I just wanted you to know that I'm proud of you. I always have been. I know I didn't say it enough." And here's the part I can't forgive. I said, "Thanks, Dad." That's it. That's all I said. "Thanks, Dad," like he'd just passed me the salt. I didn't say it back. I didn't tell him I was proud of him too, proud of how hard he'd worked, proud of the sacrifices he'd made, proud of the man he was. I didn't tell him I loved him. I didn't hug him properly. I gave him that half embrace, that quick pat on the back that means nothing at all. I drove away that night thinking I'd come back soon. We'd have more time. We'd have that real conversation eventually, when things were less busy, when I could find the right words. He died 11 weeks later. I was there at the end, in the hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and something else I don't want to name. He wasn't conscious. The nurses said he might still be able to hear, so I sat beside him and I finally said all the things I should have said on that porch. But he couldn't respond. He couldn't squeeze my hand back. He couldn't tell me it was okay, that he'd always known, that I didn't need to say the words because he felt them anyway. Maybe he did know. I tell myself that sometimes. I tell myself that fathers understand these things, that love doesn't always need language, but I don't really believe it. I think the words matter. I think he waited his whole life to hear his son say, "I love you, and I'm proud to be your son." And I never gave him that. I gave him, "Thanks, Dad," and a pat on the back. After the funeral, I went to his garage. I found the box of photographs he'd wanted to show me. Pictures of me as a baby. Pictures of him and my mother on their wedding day, both of them impossibly young. A picture I'd never seen before, my father holding me when I was maybe a week old, looking at the camera with an expression I can only describe as wonder. At the bottom of the box, there was an envelope with my name on it. Inside, a letter. He'd written it a few months before he died, probably around the time he first got the diagnosis. It wasn't long. My father wasn't a man who used many words, but he said he wanted me to know that the proudest day of his life was my graduation. He said he'd kept the program all these years. He said he knew I was busy and he understood, and he didn't want me to feel bad about not visiting more. He said he knew how much I loved him, even if I didn't say it. And he said he was sorry he hadn't been better at showing his own feelings, that he came from a time when men didn't do that, and he wished he'd been braver. He was apologizing to me. I sat in that garage and cried like I hadn't cried since I was a child, because my father, who had done everything right, who had given me everything he had, was apologizing for not being good enough. While I who had skipped visits and rushed phone calls and failed to say 3 simple words, I was the one who should have been on my knees asking for his forgiveness. That was 43 years ago. I'm an old man now. My children are grown, with children of their own. I've tried to do better with them. I tell them I love them, often, maybe too often. I say yes when they ask me to visit. I stay on the phone even when there's nothing left to say, because I know now that presence is a language of its own. But I still can't forgive myself for that evening on the porch, for those 2 words that weren't enough, for all the visits I didn't make, for treating time like it was infinite when it was bleeding away with every second. My father is buried next to my mother in a small cemetery at the edge of the town where I grew up. I go there twice a year, on his birthday and on the anniversary of his death. I sit on the grass and I talk to him. I tell him about my life. I tell him about his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and every time I tell him the things I should have said when he could hear me. I don't know if it reaches him. I don't know if there's anything after this life where he's listening. But I say the words anyway because they need to be said, even if they're 43 years too late. If you're listening to this, and there's someone in your life you haven't called, call them. Not next week, not when things calm down. Now, today. If there's something you've been meaning to say it. Don't wait for the right moment. The right moment is a lie we tell ourselves to avoid the discomfort of honesty. If you've been too busy for the people who love you, stop. Just stop. I promise you, whatever is keeping you busy will not remember you when you're gone. But the people you ignored will remember every absence. I learned this too late. I learned it standing in a hospital room, whispering to a man who couldn't hear me. I learned it reading a letter from a father who apologized for not being perfect when he was the best man I've ever known. I'm 78 years old. My own time is running out now. I can feel it in my bones, in the way mornings are harder, in the way faces from the past visit me more often than faces from the present. And when my time comes, I hope I'll see him again. I hope I'll get to say the words properly, face to face, with all the time in the world. But maybe there is no after. Maybe this is all we get. Maybe the porch and the sunset and the September air were my chance, and I missed it, and that's the end of the story. If that's true, then all I can do is tell you what I've learned and hope it lands somewhere it can do some good. Don't wait. That's all. That's everything I know now that I wish I'd known then. Don't wait.